Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. It's October, and that can only mean one thing. Yes, it's your compulsory October video. Except, in a way, it isn't, because we're not going to be looking at the orcs today. We're going to be looking at their fiendish little cousins, the goblins, or more precisely, the Night Goblins. But before we do, a quick play if I may. Firstly, if you enjoy this video, if you're enjoying the other content I'm producing, do consider liking and subscribing. Great way of helping a small channel. But even more importantly than that, if you're taking part in the campaign, please make sure you get your results in today, the day this video drops, because I will be writing month 2 imminently. That aside, let's go on to the show and turn our attention to the Night Goblins. First of all, who, or rather what, are the Night Goblins? Well, Night Goblins are, shocker, a form of goblin. And if we look at the Ravening Hordes book, it tells us that Night Goblins are the descendants of the goblin tribes that long ago ventured into the deep caves and caverns beneath the World Edge Mountains. They're goblins that live underground, well away from the sun, and because they've become so accustomed to that, they tend to dress appropriately, certainly when outdoors, so they tend to shun sunlight, heavy dark robes covering up their skin, so tend to be lighter skin, a bit more fragile skin, not used to sunlight. Now, I think it's worth a quick mention that back in the day, goblins came in 3 separate flavours. You had goblins, night goblins, and forest goblins. Goblins, or your common goblins, they were the ones that you found pretty much everywhere, living alongside the orcs in their camps, etc. Night goblins, as we've discussed. You also had forest goblins. These are the goblins that were living in the thick forests of the Empire and other places in the Warhammer world. It was the forest goblins that had the close affinity with spiders, so they tended to make up your spider rider options in your army. But they also used to come with infantry options, so you could have them really as a whole army. Forest goblin leaders, infantry, and cavalry. Much later on, they became the riders for the Arachnarok spider, so giving you that big monster option, but by that time, basic forest goblin infantry had stopped being a line produced by Games Workshop. Of course, there's nothing to stop you using common goblins, sticking a couple of feathers on them, etc., converting them up to become a forest goblin force. However, they aren't a sub-faction of orcs and goblins, if you like, in the same way that perhaps they once were. Okay, night goblins. Why would you include them above forest goblins / common goblins? Well, I don't think it's necessarily because of the stat line, but the stat line is quite important. Both common goblins or goblin mobs and night goblin mobs come with very similar raw stats. They've got a movement of 4, a weapon skill of 2, which makes them a bit vulnerable when it comes to close combat, ballistic skill of 3, so really bang average when you're using humans as what is average. They've got a strength and toughness 3, 1 wound, 1 attack. Now it's initiative and leadership where your night goblin differs from your common goblin. A night goblin has an initiative of 3 against a normal goblin's initiative of 2. So, assuming that a fight goes into round 2, round 3, I think that initiative difference is actually really important. There's a lot of initiative 3 out there. I mean, it is the human average. It's what the game is going to be centered around. So a goblin will normally be striking second in a fight, meaning there's a good likelihood, given they're not going to be particularly well armed and armoured, that a lot of the front rank is going to be taken out of action before it gets to swing. This isn't true of Night Goblins. There's a much better chance that they're fighting simultaneously, which means they're getting all of their attacks, giving them a distinct boost in close combat. The other difference in leadership is Night Goblins have a pip lower leadership. So a Goblin has a leadership of 5, a Night Goblin has a leadership of 4. Neither of these stats are great, so would normally lead you to be relying on characters anyway, whether you're using Goblins or Night Goblins, in order to get that boosted up. However, and there is another however, both Goblins and Night Goblins come with the Horde and Warband special rules. So this means that big blocks of Goblins, be they normal Goblins, be they Night Goblins, are going to find leadership buffs from their numbers as well. So leadership, I think, although low as a profile number, isn't quite the same sort of problem as you'd think, unless you start to really get whittled down. Looking purely at the characteristics of the units as well, the other differences really are a hatred of dwarves for Night Goblins. This is replaced in the Goblin mobs rules with impetuous, meaning they're likely on a 50-50 chance of them surging forward to close with the enemy. I'm not entirely sure that's something you necessarily want from units which aren't going to be great at dishing out the damage. Now, whilst normal Goblins get access to nasty Skulkers at 10 points a throw, and these do give you a little bit of potential in combat. They will add to the damage being dished out. Night Goblin mobs just have access to so much more stuff, which is useful. Firstly, there's the netters. So for the cost of 20 points per unit, a Night Goblin mob can be equipped with netters. And at the start of a fight, basically what happens is they try and entangle the enemy unit. You roll a d6, and on a 2-up, the enemy unit suffers a -1 to its strength characteristic. And if you're fighting someone that's only strength 3, that suddenly means instead of wounding you on a 4, they're wounding you on a 5. And that is going to be really useful in a protracted engagement. On a roll of 1, you do suffer the -1 to your strength yourself. So that is worth bearing in mind. There is a small risk involved in taking the netters. But the big thing is going to be fanatics. Now this was FAQ'd, so in the book it says you can include 0 to 3 fanatics per unit of Night Goblins. And this really made Night Goblin torpedoes really strong. You take a minimum size unit of Night Goblin mob, so 10 models, stick 3 fanatics in there. They go out, they're virtually impossible to target, they can put out a load of damage, and you could very easily put a cloud of fanatics between you and the enemy with some high strength armor piercing attacks to really ruin someone's day. This, as I say, has been FAQ'd, so each full unit, 10 models that a Night Goblin mob has, allows you access to a single fanatic. So if you've got 30 Night Goblins, you can have up to the maximum of 3 fanatics. And let's talk about what those fanatics bring to the table. These are released from the units. They're a hidden force beforehand, albeit if you've got open list, your opponent will know about them. Let's face it, if they see Night Goblins, they're going to assume they're there anyway. They're released at any start of turn subphase. So they are placed 3 inches away from the concealing unit, and then during the compulsory movement subphase of the turn in which they're released, Fanatic moves 2d6 in a direction chosen by the controlling player. They will never end their move on top of another unit, so they will just move through. And any unit that they collide with, friend or foe, well, they suffer d6, strength 5 hits, AP -3. To add to this, fanatics can't be charged or targeted or attacked. So this means the only way of getting rid of them is to rely on them rolling a double for their movement, then moving into difficult, dangerous or impassable terrain or a linear obstacle, in which case it comes to a very terminal stop, or destroying, getting rid of the unit that houses them before the fanatic's revealed. Vortexes will also have an impact on fanatics because that's not involving targeting. Same's true of other template weapons. Now, to take Night Goblin mobs in your army, you do need to pay a tax for that. You need a character for each Night Goblin mob that you take. So this is either a Night Goblin chief of some description or a Night Goblin shaman of some description. So war boss, warlord, shaman of either the odd nob or odd git variety. But you can get a Night Goblin character for as little as 30 points in their pants in the form of a Night Goblin big boss. And when you look at the high-level Night Goblin wizard, the Obnob, you get a toughness 4 level 4 wizard for 160 points. So cheaper than the Orc equivalent of 170 points. And you're probably going to want some level 4s floating around in your force anyway, so this isn't a terrible transaction. Now, all of this is obviously before any other things you might want to do, like casting spells, etc., and any magic abilities. Enter stage left, the Spider Banner, which gives your unit poisonous attacks. So overall, one of the things that always, without fail, disappoints me about Orcs and Goblins is that your regular Goblins, yes, you'll put them in a narrative, fluffy sort of list, but as infantry, they just don't stand up to the Night Goblins. The Night Goblins just seem to always give you that little bit more bang for your buck, which is probably why we always see a load of Night Goblins in Orc and Goblin armies, but not their more regularly occurring, in the narrative at least, cousins. As for me, for my pledge of October, I said I was going to paint 15 Night Goblins. So really half of a unit, because a unit wants to have 30 in it, because then you get access to the 3 fanatics, as we've already discussed. So I'm halfway there. Next month, I'm going to add more models to this unit, but through the course of this video, you should have seen some pictures of the work I've done so far, bringing my Night Goblin mob to the table. I'm really looking forward to getting these out and about. It's probably going to be 2025 before I've even got anything close to a complete force for Orcs and Goblins, but it's something I'm going to definitely keep working towards. All that it remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this video, as I say, please consider a subscribe, a like. If you've got any good stories about how your Night Goblins have appeared and worked on the table, do let me know down in the comments below. Once again, I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.